Imagine you're a 19-year-old kid from a small town in Appalachia. You can barely read, you've never left your county, and your IQ is a 71. In any other era of American history, you are safe. The Army won't touch you because you don't meet the minimum cognitive requirements. But it's 1966, and Robert McNamara is staring at a spreadsheet in a windowless room at the Pentagon. He has a massive problem. America is running out of high-quality soldiers for the Vietnam meat grinder. So, McNamara treats human lives like a game of SimCity. He pulls a cold, calculated move to fix his staffing shortage. He signs a piece of paper that effectively says, if they have a pulse, they can pull a trigger. He calls it Project 100,000, but every recruit has a large, scarlet red letter stamped on the first page of their contract. It was a brand of incompetence that followed them from the draft board to the grave. He's treating human beings like lab rats to see if a low IQ brain can be overclocked through the trauma of war. This is a story of McNamara's morons. 354,000 men drafted into a nightmare they couldn't even comprehend. McNamara thought he was a genius, but he was about to hit a neurobiological wall that would leave thousands of Americans dead in the mud. To understand the science of the slaughter, we have to go back to the day the IQ test became a weapon of mass destruction. That's next. Before the war, the IQ test was a helping tool. In 1905, Alfred Binet created it in France to help kids who were falling behind. His goal was pure: identify the weak to give them a boost. But when that test crossed the Atlantic, it was hijacked by the eugenics movement. Men like Henry Goddard and Lewis Terman weren't looking to help anyone. They were looking to filter humanity. They turned a simple test into a label machine. They invented words like moron, imbecile, and feeble-minded. These weren't just insults. They were permanent scientific tags. They believed intelligence was 100% genetic, hard-coded into your DNA like a serial number. If you had a low score, you were a biological liability. By 1927, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that 3 generations of imbeciles are enough, launching a mass sterilization program. This is the dark source code that McNamara used to build his experiment. Robert McNamara wasn't a soldier. He was a whiz kid from the Ford Motor Company. He was obsessed with systems optimization. To him, a soldier wasn't a hero with a story. A soldier was a unit of production. He looked at the McDonald's model, where a teenager can make a perfect burger by following a simple SOP, standard operating procedure, and thought, why can't I do that with war? He believed that if he centralized intelligence at the top with elite officers, the guys at the bottom, the hands, didn't need to think. They just needed to follow the script. He wanted to turn the Vietnam War into a giant, automated assembly line where low IQ units would execute high IQ orders. It was cold, it was calculated, and it was 100% psychopathic. He didn't care about the human element. He only cared about the statistical output. McNamara justified his experiment using a 1964 study on rats. Scientist Marion Diamond showed that rats in enriched environments, cages with toys, develop thicker cerebral cortexes. McNamara's greatest sin was his educational hubris. He genuinely believed he could fix a 70 IQ brain with a television set and a jungle patrol. He literally framed the Vietnam War as an enriched environment for the mentally disabled. He told Congress that the military would upgrade these men's IQs to the challenge of combat. But there's a massive difference between a rat playing with a wheel and a teenager dodging a bouncing Betty landmine. McNamara was playing God with 354,000 lives, betting that the trauma of war would somehow unlock a higher level of intelligence. It was a bet made in a vacuum, ignoring the reality of human suffering. Here is where the science gets gritty. High intelligence is all about the frontoparietal network, the high-speed fiber optic cable in your brain that connects pattern recognition to logic. In a high IQ brain, this connection is dense and fast. It allows for information chunking, taking 50 chaotic signals and turning them into 3 simple choices. In a low IQ brain, especially under the stress of 100% humidity and incoming fire, this network hits a neurobiological bottleneck. The brain's RAM is capped. When the adrenaline hits, the RAM shrinks even further. These men weren't lazy. Their hardware literally couldn't process the input. While a standard soldier saw a tactical maneuver, a McNamara recruit saw a whiteout of information. They would freeze in the open, forget to take the safety off their rifles, or walk straight into a line of fire because their brain couldn't render the threat fast enough. The numbers that came out of the Pentagon papers were horrifying. Project 100,000 recruits died at 3 times the rate of normal soldiers. While 354,000 were drafted, the 5,478 deaths mostly came from the specific groups sent to the front lines. They were pure infantry, the ultimate cannon fodder, because they couldn't qualify for technical jobs back at the base. The friendly fire stats were the most damning. The friendly fire rate for Project 100,000 units was 5 times the Army average. These men didn't just walk into traps. They accidentally became the trap for their own brothers in arms. Because they struggled with situational awareness, they were a constant, unintentional danger to their own units. McNamara kept his data on blast, fusing the spreadsheets to hide the fact that he was sending the mentally disabled into a zinc coffin pipeline. Just like the Russian Venera 11 and 12 probes, which survived the heat of Venus but stayed blind because the lens caps wouldn't pop off, these recruits were systemically blind. They were physically in the war, but they couldn't see the hidden rules of survival. Veteran stories are filled with the Jenkins effect. A recruit who could never remember which boot went on which foot, or a soldier who would try to clean his rifle while it was still loaded. These weren't funny Army fails. They were snafus that resulted in thousands of young men being returned to their mothers in boxes. McNamara's experiment wasn't just a failure. It was a crime of arrogance against human neurobiology. Is IQ a death sentence? Ask Richard Feynman. He won a Nobel Prize for quantum electrodynamics, yet his high school IQ was 124. He was a math god, but his verbal scores were merely respectable. This is the information gap McNamara missed. IQ is a bullet, but wisdom is a sights. A high IQ person can be a total system slave, perfectly executing a stupid plan like McNamara himself. A lower IQ person can have spatial intuition or grit that an IQ test can't measure. By filtering the Army purely on test scores, McNamara didn't just recruit the slow, he destroyed the human intuition that actually wins wars. He turned the Army into a brainless machine, and the machine broke the moment it hit the mud of Saigon. Fast forward to 2026. We are seeing a eugenics 2.0 comeback. Corporations are using AI-driven predictive hiring that is just a digital version of the 1920s IQ label machine. They're looking for optimized units and filtering out risky assets. We are living in a world where your data profile is becoming your new IQ score. McNamara's experiment proved that when you treat humans like data points, you get glitches. But in a human system, a glitch means a funeral. The Origin Untold truth is that the McNamara mindset is still running the show. From the collapsing front lines in Ukraine to the social engineering in the West, the leaders are still staring at spreadsheets, still betting on systems over souls. Project 100,000 wasn't a failure because the recruits were dumb. It was a failure because the leaders were psychopathic. It proved that you cannot program a human to ignore their own biology. 354,000 men were used as lab rats in a cold experiment that left a generation broken. When the war ended, they weren't given upgraded lives. They were given PTSD and a one-way ticket to the bottom of the social ladder. The real intelligence isn't how fast you can solve a pattern. It's whether you can see the pattern of evil before it swallows you whole. This is the Origin Untold. If you want to see how this kind of meat grinder logic is currently deleting the Russian military in real time, watch our deep dive on the Ukraine frontline collapse. And for the $2 billion ghost that watches these experiments from the stratosphere, check out the B-2 Spirit Bomber. Join the inner circle. Hit subscribe.